What does it mean to be a man in the modern world? Some would say that men have become soft.
You are weak. The men around you, the young men around you are also weak.
This is an existential crisis, failing young men.
Those people that want everyone to comply and conform would like to see men weak. Weak men are easy to topple.
Various studies are showing that men are struggling to find their way in life. They're dating less and having less sex. Men are turning to platforms like OnlyFans to fulfill their sexual desires, and instead choosing not to pursue women in the real world.
Like, you know, there are men out there that are blowing their whole life savings on these girls.
Why suddenly do your palms start sweating? Why are you a little bit more breathless? Why has your heartbeat gone up a little bit more?
People are terrified to be rejected.
I wanted to find out why men have lost their way. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is the importance of having a strong male role model?
10.
Are we facing a crisis in masculinity? Simps, beta males, cucks, soy boys, just a few of the labels associated with modern men. Men are reporting to be having less sex than ever, and the dating market has become an increasingly daunting place. Dr. Gad Saad is a psychologist with an expertise in this field. A lot of people say men have never been this lonely. What do you think the reason for that is?
So there are many reasons why people are lonely, and specifically why men might be, particularly lonely. I think feminism has played a real trick on many men, at least certainly within the West, whereby men are stuck between a rock and a hard place, in that women still desire men who are bold, who are assertive, who will come up to you to try to woo you. And yet from feminism, we hear that if you approach someone and even compliment them when that compliment wasn't, something that was desired, then it becomes a form of verbal rape. So many men are terribly afraid to approach women. And so the natural dynamics between men and women have been eradicated because so many men are terrified to approach women. And I have anecdotal evidence of this, because I receive, because of the platforms that I've built, I receive innumerable emails, both from men and women that speak to your question, why are men lonely? But specifically, I get emails from women frustrated that men are no longer approaching them, right? They go out, they get ready, they're beautiful, they're ready to meet and mingle, and yet many men are too tepid to approach them. Well, it's not difficult to explain why that would be the case, because men are terrified to make a social faux pas. Even as a professor at university now for almost 30 years, I have to go through mandatory training where I am taught, what is appropriate and what is not. Imagine how insulting that is to me, right? I'm a 58-year-old man who's been a professor for 30 years, but now I have to be, taking mandatory training courses. So for the average 20, 21, 22-year-old male, that might be daunting. So I think that might be one of the reasons why we're seeing an epidemic proportion of loneliness.
With women having more options than ever because of online dating apps and social media, what are the implications of that to the day-to-day man?
I think the standards that men and women choose in their exact mates are inscribed in our genes. Now, of course, those standards might be become more exacting or less. So let me give you an example of a study that was done, I think, in the 1970s, based on a famous country music song, where I think that the title of the song was "Don't the Women All Get Prettier Near Closing Time?" And what that song was referring to is the idea that the standard that a man might have for meeting a lovely woman at 10 o'clock at night at the bar is different than the standard that he might set at 1 o'clock at the bar, which is different from the one that he sets at 3 o'clock in the morning when the bar is about to close. So to your point, I think that both men and women might set their standards at different points in terms of a threshold, depending on various environmental contingencies. But I think, generally speaking, the ideal standards that men and women have in a prospective mate are invariant across time and place. women desire men that have resources. Not only, right? They also want kindness. They also want boldness. They also want assertiveness. They also want all other things equal. A guy who's tall. They want, a guy that has the V shape. Men want women who are youthful and beautiful and so on. So these standards are inscribed in our genes, but the way that we change them is that we recognize that our mating value dictates what I can expect to get, right? So if I am 6'1" and I am a famous soccer player and I am a billionaire and I am a neurosurgeon, then I can expect that the woman that I'm going to attract is going to have just as high a mating value as me. There's what's called assortative mating on our respective mating values. But if I am none of those things, then I can't expect to get the supermodel. So I think the way that we adjust our standards is as a function of recognizing what our mating value is, and we then typically end up picking someone who is of roughly equal mating value.
So we hear a lot about incels. A large proportion of men are really struggling in the dating market. Is that being caused to any extent because the top percentages of men are essentially hoarding all the women?
Right. Well, I mean, to the extent that social media allows us to be exposed to a greater set of possible mates, then I could expect that maybe people might become more exacting in what they're looking for, right? So, in the past, having to meet someone required a lot of effort. I have to go to a place where men and women are hanging out. I have to hopefully present myself nicely. I have to start a conversation with different potential prospective mates. But I guess we live in a society that's very fast-paced. So about a decade or two ago, we had those speed dates events that used to be organized where you get to sit down and very, very quickly you've got up to 3 minutes to meet one person after the next. The idea being that will at least facilitate me finding an ideal mate because I'm exposed to so many. So in that sense, now that I've got social media, now that I've got these dating apps that allow me to swipe right or swipe left, and I should say I've been married for too long for me to have ever used any of those apps. But based on what I hear from some of my students, you can now go to one of those, Tinder and so on, and I just keep scrolling until I find the right guy or girl, and then I swipe right or swipe left. So I think in that sense, technology, not just social media, technology has blown up what's called in consumer psychology, we talk about a consideration set. A consideration set is the set of options. Let's say you're choosing between beers. So my consideration set might consist of 4 typical beers that I will seriously evaluate before choosing which beer I'm going to choose. And all the other beers I'll never consider because I only want to drink German beer or whatever it is. And so I think that social media has expanded the consideration set that most people are working with precisely because I'm exposed to so many more prospective mates. So in that sense, yes.
Do you believe that the access to OnlyFans and porn is meaning some men are making the decision to go that route instead of trying to chase women in the real world?
The guys who have decided to check out of the mating market and instead, satisfy their sexual urges through OnlyFans, in a sense, what they're saying is, look, I can be just as satisfied, addressing my libidinal drives without having to go through the hard work of meeting someone, without having to go through the endless likely rejections that I'll face, unless I'm one of the 5% of supremely desired men. And so they take the easy way out. And that, of course, could be a problem. There is no way to deal with that, again, other than to say it takes effort to meet people. And so, yes, you can satisfy your sexual needs by going on OnlyFans, but in the long run, that's not what's going to give you purpose and meaning in life.
With these problems facing masculinity, I wanted to get a woman's point of view on the situation and see what their take is.
I'm Elle Brooke. I'm a wannabe boxer, a TikTok star, YouTuber, influencer, and more known as an OnlyFans star. I think my typical subscriber is definitely young, in the terms of probably 18 to 30, which is quite an big age gap. But all my subscribers are from my social media, and my social media is definitely targeting younger people, because you think, who's 50 and using TikTok? Not that many. I wish I could penetrate into the older audience. I'd be making a bloody killing. I wish, but it's the younger people. So it's the general people you'd see at a football game, because I have football fans, boxing fans, people that put you into group chats and they find it funny. There's like a big range of guys who they might, it could be. I just know they're young, and they have normal jobs, because I speak to a lot of them as well. They're your electrician, your plumber, your recruitment consultant. I mean, I've had like a couple of billionaires, but it's just your normal people that typically subscribe. So I don't feel bad, because ultimately it's their choice, and I would never, ever, ever beg anyone to give any more than they couldn't afford.
I first realized I had a porn addiction when I tried to stop, and that was when I got into a relationship with a woman who ended up becoming my wife. But in hindsight, there was a lot of smoke from as young as 12 or 13 years old. The earliest memory I have now of things that appeared to have an addiction was when I was around 12 or 13 years old. My sister had her own computer, and the lengths I would go to in order to access pornography on her computer were fairly extreme, including learning how to take apart computers and remove different parts of the motherboard so that passwords would forget themselves. So, yeah, looking back, it was there and present for a long time, but I didn't notice until I tried to stop. Sometimes that's the only way to know we have an addiction, is we try to stop it and we see how hard it is to stop. Porn certainly affected my willingness to engage with women in real ways. I oftentimes used it as a way to neutralize that drive. So in some ways, the way I convinced myself was that it was helping for work. I wasn't wasting as much time with women. But there's no question that some of that, like as I'm growing up, those putting myself out there with women and engaging in some of the risks in those interactions, I used porn to avoid having to go down that path. The feeling of rejection, learning to handle rejection, all of that stuff, porn really stunted that.
If there's a need and a want, there's a service for it. So I don't think it targets lonely men in particular. Like, I don't go on my story like, any lonely men, sub tonight. That's not my catchphrase. Like, that's not how I'm trying to sell my services or, my OnlyFans as a product. It's that, I'm a woman. If you want to get off to watching my content, here it is. I don't care whether you're in a relationship or not, what your circumstances are. If you want to enjoy it, have it.
I think a lot of men use porn, a lot of it is innocence. They just kind of start there. We're introduced to it early on. It's easy, it's accessible, and eventually it becomes a drive in and of itself. Once we do it a few times, and it's almost like a magnetic pull, pulling us back there. But initially, it's how easy it is. Even pre the internet, porn took a little bit of work. You had to go somewhere and buy something, or buy a video, or buy a magazine. There was some work. Now there's very little of that. It's the reason we go there, and we feel like we're getting something from it. We feel like we're getting something from it in the exchange. It allows us to enter a fantasy realm where we're able to feel like we're experiencing something without doing any of the work.
I think people subscribing need to realize, like, you're investing into an experience and not that person. They might think that they're gonna marry you and live happily ever after and that kind of thing, but ultimately, you do have relationships with people, and you do have relationships with your subscribers because you're talking to them all the time. But whether they'll get more than that, I don't know. And whether, I think it would be a shame if that kind of relationship stops them dating in the real life. But, if that person is, in love with this, not fictional character because we're not fake, but this online persona and who we are, then, who's to stop them? I think if, they're probably introverted themselves. So I doubt if they were speaking to us, they'd be dating other people regardless. So yeah, it's a tough one.
I think some men are lazy, some men are not. Does porn impact that? In my case, it pulled down my drive tremendously. Interestingly enough, I did have a work drive, but I didn't have the zest for life, the joy, the small things weren't enough to capture my excitement. And I'm not only referring to sexually, just every single day it seemed to suck the marrow out of a lot of areas of life. And it's also used as a very powerful way to distract from everyday life experiences. And pains don't have to be processed if I can just escape into a realm that has a tremendous ability to overload my senses.
Whether men are softer, yes, but society as a whole is a lot softer. I think there's obviously like two arguments about whether traditional dating or modern dating is the right thing to do. I think everyone would rather meet someone in a bar. I think if you talk to anyone, they rather would. But whether that's feasible now, I think that, with video games and everything like that, people stay indoors and they tend to, be introverted. Like, not everyone's extroverted anymore. So, whether that's lazy, it's just everyone's doing it. So imagine you go to the bar, but there's no one there. And the people you meet at the bar are not always the people that you're going to marry and end up with forever. So you've just wasted a whole day going to the bar. At least you can see someone online and think, yeah, they're good looking or they're not. It's just, I think everyone's wanting like instant gratification nowadays and instant dopamine. So, that's just how it is now.
Men have had different challenges over the years, but with divorce rates at an all-time high, perhaps the lack of a strong male role model is having a knock-on effect on young men. What impact will a lack of fathers have on young boys growing up today?
The dad-deprived boys are very often delaying transition to becoming adults. Boys are 66% of the people living in their families' basements, much more likely to move back in with their family after they've completed high school or college or so on, and they're much more likely to drop out of college. They're much more likely to be unemployed for a longer period of time. They're much more likely to be addicted and not really get their act together, addicted to drugs, addicted to opioids, addicted to video games, addicted to sexuality, to porn. And these boys just, they don't feel good about themselves. They often feel depressed, particularly those addicted to video games don't sometimes even see themselves as being a real human being.
So, do you think this is the weakest male generation in history?
What's happened in the 56 largest developed nations around the world, the word developed implies that survival is taken care of to some degree, especially among the middle and upper middle class. Then the middle and upper middle class get permission to have divorces, and those divorces lead to oftentimes children being raised without fathers, or the society gets permission for single mothers to raise the children by themselves without getting married. And that tends to lead to an absence of fathers. And the absence of fathers tends to lead to the absence of boundary enforcement. And that in turn leads to the absence of postponed gratification, which leads to a much weaker generation that has minimal discipline.
How is young men's reliance on porn and OnlyFans having an impact on them starting families, approaching women, and having children?
When men become reliant on porn, what ends up happening is that they start becoming desensitized to nuance. And the way to bring a woman into your life in a way that's intimate is to be able to sort of focus on body language. On if you ask a woman a question, you're talking with a woman, and there's just little changes in her eyes, little changes in the hesitation patterns, things that are beyond the ability of porn to focus on, because porn is trying to sort of get you to be able to come and to be excited. And so it's really, and each time you experience porn, you become less and less excited at the level that you were excitable before. And so by the time you get to a female in real life, she often feels turned off by your addiction to some type of physical behavior that just goes right into sexuality, as opposed to really doing what is the best foreplay for her, which is to hear the types of things she's saying, respond to the little nuances, to know which no's mean no, which no's mean maybe, which no's mean I need more time for you to be focused on me. I need more time for you to talk about yourself. I need more time for you to be holding me. I need more time for me to be caressed. I need more time for you to show respect for the ideas that I have. And all these things come through body language even more than they do through verbal language. And porn doesn't give you that. And so so the addiction to non-nuanced connection with real life women, and in other ways of your life, real life men too, because at work you're going to meet a lot of men, and what is said is so frequently not what is meant, and the value of knowing what is meant comes from tone of voice, eye contact, just little ways the body moves or doesn't move. Those are the things that are really of great value. Now, when that addiction to porn starts taking over and you feel rejected by women and also other men, you start becoming depressed. You could start becoming isolated. You become much more vulnerable to taking drugs, to drinking, to getting addicted to video games, to living in a separate world. You become much more lonely. And then when you start asking out real women in real life and they're rejecting you, there's an anger, because anger is vulnerability's mask. And so underneath that anger is great vulnerability on your part, but the anger often manifests. And so you might express that anger by, hitting somebody that doesn't respect you and then getting in trouble for assault. Or in the worst case scenario, you become depressed and isolated and you commit suicide. So at the age of 9, boys and girls commit suicide very rarely and equally. But between the ages of 10 and 14, boys commit suicide twice as often as girls in the US and the UK. Between the ages of 15 and 19, boys commit suicide 4 times as often as girls do. And between the ages of 20 and 24, it's about 5 times what girls commit suicide at. And so you can see how this, when a boy doesn't develop this empowerment to connect with all those nuanced messages that computers have not yet mastered, and porn certainly has no intent of mastering, then you're going to, then it often leads to depression, isolation, anger, feelings of anger from rejection, often acting out, and in worst case scenarios, either doing things like mass shootings or committing suicide.
Is the power exchange of OnlyFans as a byproduct making men weak, in the respect that women can manipulate men for money in exchange for their sexuality?
I think sites like OnlyFans, and when women learn that they can sort of hone their beauty and their flirtation power and their sexual power as something that makes them stronger, and men, and they can manipulate men as a result of that, it really can create a lot of negative things for both women and for men. Men, especially as men are tuning into things like porn, and they become less aware of nuances, they're better able to be taken advantage of by a woman who's really able to use nuances and flirtation and certain types of eye contact to manipulate a man into feeling sexual and becoming her fan. And so it hurts guys in the sense that it's perfecting the manipulation on the part of girls and women to manipulate guys and to focus therefore on that part of her gifts, as opposed to other gifts like becoming an engineer or becoming a social scientist or becoming a nurse or a doctor. And because she's making plenty of money just flirting or just exposing portions of her body, and that's hurting women, I believe, and it's also hurting men, especially when men play into it by becoming her fan.
So with testosterone levels and semen levels being at both all-time lows, and these two things being massively ingrained in masculinity, what's your take on this?
One of the things that we've seen in the era of the boy crisis has been that the sperm counts of males has gone down 60% in most of the industrialized nations. And there's a lot of reasons for this. And one of those reasons is the leaching of plastics into rivers and lakes. And what we see in rivers and lakes where plastics are leached is that those plastics release phthalates, and phthalates mimic estrogen. So the sea bass in those lakes and rivers often do not have testicles anymore. The male sea basses have lost their testicles because of the phthalates mimicking estrogen and not testosterone, and not rather the male sperm. And so the challenge with the sperm counts going down, this is not just an abstract challenge. This threatens the fertility of the children and therefore the health of the children. And it's not just a male problem, because half the children whose health is affected is female children. And so if we care about our daughters, we need to care about our sons. We need to work on not just the plastics, because that's one contributor, but as boys soften up and they expect only to be taken care of rather than to also take care of, and they unbecome men, their IQs go down. We've seen a 15-point drop in IQs. Now that 15-point drop in male IQs around the world seems like a lot, but it's more than just what it seems. Usually, generation for generation, since the IQs go up 10 points per generation. The studies of this have started in 1980s, and there should have been a 20-point increase in the two generations since the 1980s in the IQs of males. Instead of there being a 20-point increase in the IQs of males, there's been a 15-point drop in the IQs of males. And as we require less of boys, the synapses do not develop as effectively, and boys don't learn to move out of their comfort zone, to try new things, to see what fails, what succeeds, to retry something again until it succeeds. They have less and less postponed gratification, all of which decreases their IQs, as opposed to what's happening to girls, where the IQs are increasing. And we are, so we're seeing, and girls, the big problem with this is that, one of the big problems with this is that the girls have very little interest in boys who are less intelligent. They have very little interest in boys who are less motivated. Boys compete for the win. Girls compete to marry and be involved with and have children with the winners. And as boys stop winning, they get left out, they get lonely, they get isolated, they get depressed, and they can become suicidal or so angry that they act out in things like the mass shootings. In the United States, in the 21st century, we've had about a mass shooting a day. Some of those shootings have been school shootings. Among the school shootings that have been the worst, where 10 or more people have been killed in school shootings, there's been 8 of those where 10 or more people have been killed in school shootings. And all 8 of those that we know the family background for, all 8 of them have been by boys and by dad-deprived boys.
There's a lot of studies out there which have shown that testosterone levels are on the decline. I wanted to find out why this is happening.
Do I think low testosterone has a link with modern men becoming weaker. Yeah, I do actually, and I'll tell you why. Testosterone is the foundation for making a man a man. And whilst we say low testosterone levels, what I think we really mean, there are many factors that play into that, which is the free testosterone, but we tend to refer to testosterone as the total testosterone, and that's what some of the studies are looking at, that's what the ranges are looking at. We know that sperm counts are dropping, we know that testosterone levels in men are dropping, and is this making men weaker? Well, we know testosterone is responsible for muscle mass growth, for muscle strength. So yeah, if your testosterone levels are dropping, which we know on whole they are, then we also could surmise that men's strength is dropping as well, or men are becoming more weak. But what do we mean by weak? Are we talking about weak in spirit, weak in the ability to accomplish things, or are we talking about pure physical muscle strength as being weak? And there's probably a combination of both. Whilst you can train the muscle strength, you can also train kind of your fortitude for handling certain situations. So testosterone is dropping. Can we link it to men becoming weaker? I think we can, but I think it also depends on what we define as being weak. So we know testosterone, those who have optimal testosterone levels tend to have more drive. They're more successful in their careers, in their work, in their sport. You know, they say CEOs of companies tend to have high testosterone levels. We've seen this in certain studies. People with higher cognition levels, or people who had low levels of testosterone and then are given testosterone replacement therapy, we can see that in our patient base where they have an improvement. They'll report, I don't have the brain fog, I have this improved cognition, and some of them will even start businesses off the back of testosterone replacement therapy. So they were low before, we optimize their levels, and now they've got the confidence and the drive, a natural burning drive to improve their lot in life, to improve whether from baseline to building something, and they're no longer afraid. So testosterone has a real big impact on being able to drive things forward, to be a motivator. Obviously, you have to have some of that from within, but testosterone has a big part to play in all that. So what are the behavioral changes from low testosterone in men? Well, some of the behavioral changes are the most common ones when we're talking to patients is, do you still have, you still have a desire for sex? So this is a desire that drives your behavior. And when testosterone is dropping, if men come to us with low testosterone, they're saying they aren't having this desire for libido, but we also see other changes in their work performance. And so one of the questions on the Adams questionnaire, which is almost can be used as a diagnostic tool to determine whether or not a patient has low testosterone, one of the questions asks, have you seen a diminishment in your performance at work? Have you seen a diminishment in your performance with your sport, weight training or the sport that you partake in? And these are two very important ones. And if the man answers, yes, I am, this is linked to low testosterone. Do I believe testosterone content online is being shadow banned? I think it is. And I'll tell you why. I don't know if shadow ban's the right word, right? Where I think shadow ban means you can scream out into a forum and you're the only one that could hear you. No one else knows that you're talking. But along the lines, we can see, I've seen from the AdSense as an example, which is part of Google and YouTube, as part of social media, where I would put out an ad about one of our videos and I would use the word testosterone. And it would go for like an hour or two, and then I would look back to see if I'm getting any more ads shown, and it stops it altogether, saying I've somehow violated a community standard, and all I did was use the word testosterone. Now we forget testosterone is a natural hormone in all of our bodies. It shouldn't be a restricted term or not be able to be used. Testosterone, yes, is a drug, but testosterone is your natural hormone in your body, and so I think because of the community standards and the guidelines on YouTube and other social media platforms, but YouTube is some of the worst, I do think they are minimizing or limiting content based on testosterone. I've seen it with some of the videos that we've posted, the short videos. And I know YouTube has been trying to promote short videos. And we've been putting out the same video on the YouTube Shorts as we do on Instagram, as we do on TikTok. My Instagram video for the same exact video would get 2,000 views overnight. I barely reach 100 on the short for YouTube. something doesn't make sense there. And I think it's, at least the YouTube at the moment, is targeting testosterone-related content. Testosterone should not be demonized, and nor should maleness or masculinity be demonized. And testosterone is a part of every healthy male, and it should be optimal. So that's, I think the YouTube and social media channels really need to reverse course and allow the word to get out about how testosterone can be helpful for many men, overcoming many of the problems that they have, like mental health issues, which stem from lower levels of testosterone. If men can't get the information, the content they need about healthy, optimal testosterone, then I'm afraid men are going to be stuck in a rut for a very long time and forced down the path of SSRIs and antidepressants, whereas natural bioidentical testosterone will make a really big impact on these men's lives. All right, so what's impacting men's levels of testosterone today? So top of the charts really, and I've said it before, is kind of the lifestyle that we lead, but that's very broad. So let's get into it more specifically. The diets, but it's not just diet, it's what's in our food, the pesticides, the toxins that are all around us, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink. These are all very much can be contaminated, that affect you probably well before you're even in existence as you're in the womb. We know that we're seeing microplastics in the womb. These may act as endocrine disruptors that are already setting you off on the wrong foot before you even get started. But so these have an impact. So you have to overcome these negative impacts of the environmental chemicals. But there's also lifestyle. I've said before, we're not as active as we once were. We're not getting as physical as we once were, though you can use the gym. So you have to counter that with more gym going, more exercise, proper diet, maybe organic foods to avoid some of the pesticides and the chemicals in the foods that we eat, and getting quality sleep, putting the phones away, avoiding the blue light before bed. These will all help in maintaining healthy levels of testosterone.
For the masses of men who are having difficulty meeting women and men who are struggling in the dating marketplace, where do they go from here? Are things going to get worse before they get better?
So the good news, I think, for men, the message that I want to leave men with, who are watching this, is you really don't have to despair. Yes, it's a very, very difficult dynamic when we go out there in the mating market, because the dynamic of life are that women just have to sit back passively while all the suitors huff and puff, and most of us will be rejected. But you can reduce your chances of rejection by taking appropriate steps. And therefore, the message of personal responsibility and personal agency is truly powerful. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my forthcoming book, is to offer people, in general, but in some cases, I'm specifically talking to men, offer them hope about how they can truly improve their trajectory in life. And so get off the couch, stop playing video games, develop a good vocabulary, be well read. And by the way, I don't mean to imply that the only road to women's heart is to be educated and have degrees from Ivy League schools. Not at all, right? You could be a great stand-up comic, and you ascend the hierarchy of your profession, and then tons of women will want to potentially meet you. So there isn't a singular, unique trajectory to ascend the social hierarchy. That's the beauty of life, is that the universal is that women do seek high status men, but each of us can instantiate that desire that women have in different ways. I could become the great soccer player. I could become a great politician. I could be Pablo Picasso, who was a short little guy, frumpy, chubby, bald, and yet Pablo Picasso had a very, very long line of incredibly beautiful women who were deeply desirous to have sex with him because he was Pablo Picasso. And so don't despair. Don't just spend all your money and time on OnlyFans. Do the hard work, and hopefully you'll find some interesting suitors.
My advice to a young man would be, don't be too scared to do things that are traditional. I think it's worked for hundreds and thousands of years, so why not? If you want to look after a woman and take care of them, do so. I think that if you take a woman on a date, you should definitely pay. I'm probably going to get hated for that one. I think that, you know, if a woman walks in front of you, offer to open the door, pull the chair out for them on a date, that kind of thing. And focus on yourself, and don't be scared about wanting to be the main breadwinner in the family. I think that is also really attractive to women. And I think even though it is good for women to have their own business and their side of things, ultimately, a man who's going to look after them in the long term is a great thing in like the nuclear family and everything.
If someone's porn use has become an addiction at that level, then it kind of needs all hands on deck to tackle it. The first step is distancing oneself completely from the use. There needs to be a period of about 30 days to start thinking clearly again. And from there, a more careful plan of action can be introduced, where we have the opportunity to access the deeper feelings that have been unprocessed through the porn use, or the ones that we're escaping from present day from the porn use. And in terms of those 30 days, it's kind of however someone can get there is good enough for me. You know, if it means eating tubs of ice cream not to watch porn, I think it's worth it. Just get away from the porn for a period of time, get the head clear from that specific vice, and then from there, look at what's really feeding it. During those first 30 days, it's too much of the draw is physical. We're not able to access what the emotional underpinnings of the porn use is until we eliminate it for a period of time. So it's somehow, some way, stop. If that means filters, friends, meetings, support groups, competitions, whatever it takes to get out of it for those 30 days, and then start getting a little bit under the hood in terms of some of those emotions that need resolution from it. If it's not an addiction, then usually after those 30 days, a person will have a lot of reprieve. Anyway, it's maybe the physical draws that's pulling someone, but when we talk about addiction, we're talking about that emotional stuff that unless we remove it, and it could take many years to remove it, there's always going to be the pull to come back to it.
I think it's clear we do have a crisis in masculinity on our hands. But the good news is, there are things you can do as outlined by the voices in this documentary. Look after your body, spend time outdoors, take on responsibility, and realise as a man you are needed in this world.